Happy Monday, hockey fans. Welcome into an all-new edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the DFO YouTube, where you should have hit the subscribe button by now. If you haven't, do it literally right now. The show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app, use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And it's never ordinary when I have a chance to welcome Colby Cohen in as my co-host, because Frank Saravalli's on a plane going to the Board of Governors meeting. Colb, how was your weekend?
Well, I'm already catching flack in the chat for not even doing an outfit change from Morning Cup of Hockey to DFO Live. But I will tell you, it throws me off when I do this show with you because your introduction is so professional. And I'm just so used to working with Johnny first thing in the morning with the introduction is like a roller coaster ride. So it's nice to work with a true pro in yourself, Tyler.
Yeah, that's why they pay me the medium-sized bucks, Kolb. Anyways, if you're in the chat, we are looking for our Daily Faceoff inbox question, hashtag askdfo. We also have our Dominion Lending Center's poll question up right now, which is this: which team has the best chance of turning around their season? And your options are Ottawa, Buffalo, or Detroit. Have your say. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We're also going to be joined by Lance Lysowski from Buffalo in a bit to talk some Sabres. But first, Colby, let's stay in the state of New York and talk about the big news from Friday. And the Rangers, they were busy. Chris Drury was earning his money as he not only traded Jacob Trouba, he signs Igor Shesterkin to his massive extension, as I'm sure everybody watching the show knows by now, the largest contract handed out to a goaltender. And I think there is a certain amount of negative PR that comes with trading away your captain in Jacob Trouba, even if it was a good deal and they got out of the money and that's all solid. The Rangers going and then immediately having the Shesterkin deal is a nice little PR cover-up. When you look at that day as a whole, was it a win for the Rangers?
I would say so. I think it was a win for the Rangers. Look, there's so many different ways you look at this whole Jacob Trouba situation, but at the end of the day, it's a business decision. It's a business move. Just like for him, it was a business decision when he decided this summer that he wasn't going to waive to go to a team that appeared on his list. And so Chris Drury made a determination and he said, you've got two choices, waive or you're going on waivers. And then you're rolling the dice of where you could end up, wink, wink, handshakes. So at the end of the day, I don't get mad at people for exercising their rights within contracts, within the CBA. Call them loopholes, call them whatever you want. They're playing by the rules. It's a cutthroat business. If I'm not going to be mad at Jacob Trouba for holding on to his clause, which I thought that, hey, you earned that clause, exercise it as you please. I read off a number of guys on Morning Cup of Hockey, most notably and most recently it was Torrey Krug. But it goes all the way back to Matt Sundin in 2008, who was a captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs when they asked him to waive his no-trade clause. So all in all, I thought it was good business and a job well done by Chris Drury. And I don't buy the narrative that people aren't going to want to sign in New York because Chris Drury is doing a cutthroat job as general manager. That is a little bit ridiculous to me, and that is a little bit of a pipe dream by fans that are fans of teams not named the New York Rangers.
Yeah, I think if it was another organization, you'd maybe sit there and be like, you need to watch how you do business here to stay in the good books of some players. But if you're the Rangers and it's the chance to play at MSG and everything that comes with it, you're not worried about being cutthroat. But now as we shift our attention to what's next for this Rangers team, and listen, it's not looking great for them in terms of the playoff picture. And it's like, no, they're technically holding on to a playoff spot, only 26 games, but they're not looking like the team we thought they were going to be. And even though, again, I thought maybe this Trouba thing would spark them, they lose 7-5 to Seattle. So you've sold off Trouba now if you're Chris Drury, but there needs to be some amount of attention paid towards adding, right? Like, what's next for Drury here? What should be his next move?
Well, look, we talked about this in the pre-show meeting. It's a crying shame that Cam Fowler was not a part of this deal because he would have improved that Rangers blue line immediately. And to me, you got problems on the back end. Ryan Lindgren has had a really tough stretch of hockey this year. I know everybody's ready to just show him out the door, but he's been a good player. And he's done well with Adam Fox in the past. And those two go way back to the national development team. Ryan Lindgren also worn a letter most of his career at other levels of hockey. So I do think right now we have this recency bias of the first quarter of the season where Ryan Lindgren has been bad, no doubt about it. But you look at the rest of the decor, Keandre Miller, he's vastly underperformed this season. He looks disinterested in the defensive zone. Sure, Schneider's played better at times. And then you've got Zach Jones, who's kind of breaking his way in, and Victor Mancini, who's a young guy. He's a rookie. So if you have Stanley Cup aspirations, this is not going to get it done. And that's where the focus needs to lie. And that's where I think it's crazy that they didn't find a way to include Cam Fowler, who, from what I understand, would have waived to go to New York. Anaheim could have eaten some money. Sure, you would have had to pay with a prospect or maybe a draft pick to make that happen, but you're in win now mode if you're Chris Drury. So, ultimately the Rangers need to improve their back end.
Yeah, and like I see Joe's comment being like, it's time to move off Lindgren. He's got to go. But I'm just not sure. And I know there was talk about Chris Kreider too, and how he's a guy who the Rangers were maybe floating out there. You've made your one sell-off. You have all the cap space you need now if you're the Rangers. You need to add. You can't sacrifice a Lindgren. You can't sacrifice a Kreider now. Like, the message has been sent. You need to get better. And I think that's got to be the next move for Chris Drury. Let's flip things over to the other side of things in Anaheim. And GM Pat Verbeek was catching a little bit of heat this morning on the DFO rundown with Jason Gregor and Frank Saravalli. And they were kind of saying, like, why did he give Chris Drury this get out of jail free card? And I guess if you really wanted the player, and if there was a Columbus and a Detroit who were in the mix saying, we'll take his full salary as well, then you got to pull the trigger on it if you're Pat Verbeek and have the courage of your convictions, if you will. But for me, a little bit weird to look at this team who is struggling this year, dead last in the Pacific. They're below San Jose in the standings, and they go add a piece like Jacob Trouba, and maybe it's cover for when they eventually trade Cam Fowler. They'll still have some good vets. But as I kind of sat and went through this weekend, the trade just, it didn't click for me. It didn't start making sense for me from a Ducks perspective. I don't know what their direction is there.
Well, look, let's always remember one big key. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder in life, but especially in the game of hockey, right? I mean, look at all the coaches that get fired and then hired 3 days later by another team. So I think these GMs all look at players. They all evaluate players a lot differently. My understanding of the Anaheim locker room is that it's been a little bit of a mess, right? It's been a group that has had a very difficult time buying into what the coach is asking, getting on the same page. You bring in Alex Killorn, who is definitely well known as a leader. He's a winner. But other than that, look, Radko Gudas, sure, he's been around, no doubt. Cam Fowler, he's been around, but he's a pretty quiet guy. So you go out, you acquire another captain, you bring in a guy who's a big, strong defenseman. You give him an opportunity. You give him a look out there. You bring more leadership. And look, I think they probably think that they've got the cap space to do it, and they probably think it helps improve their team. It helps connect the dots between the young players, the guys like Zellweger, the guys like Lacombe, and then you look up front. And I know, I know they're dealing with some injuries right now with Zegras. Cutter Gauthier has been a little bit inconsistent, but I just think they looked at it as an opportunity to give up nothing and to get a guy who is widely looked at as a good captain in the National Hockey League. In the New York Ranger fan base bubble, Jacob Trouba, is kryptonite. But to the rest of the league, he's not looked at that way. Okay, the rest of the league sees value on this guy, not for $8 million, but to the Anaheim Ducks, $8 million doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. They do have a boatload of cap space, even with Trouba in the mix now, still $21.2 million according to Puckpedia. And the other side of this too is, you talked about Trouba and his reputation outside of New York. Like, if at next year's deadline, they keep 50% of that, they're getting more than their 4th round pick that they gave up for him. And then it's the same thing with Fowler too. Like, he didn't get thrown into this Trouba deal, but like, if the Ducks are willing to keep 50% of Cam Fowler for this year and next year, they're getting a lot for him at the deadline.
Yeah, I agree. I see Sharma said that in the chat as well. Like, this is a valuable asset. I think, this was good asset management for them. And you're right. I mean, when you're a team that can eat contracts, especially when you're in a rebuild, you're going to get beautiful returns. Look at what the Blackhawks did a couple of years ago with Sam Lafferty and Jake McCabe to make that move work in Toronto. Expect to see Pat Verbeek do that with some of these guys, including probably Cam Fowler at some point. And look, if you bring Jacob Trouba in for $4 million and you have him for a short period of time, and he's, maybe let's say one of 7 defensemen who can play for you on any given night, like I like the way that looks. I really do.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's shift gears to this weekend and what happened. And for the Senators, Sabres, and Red Wings, it was wins that weren't happening. All three continue to struggle. All three are below the Columbus Blue Jackets in the Eastern Conference playoff race. It is not going well for three clubs that, again, this year were kind of all lumped together as the teams who were supposed to take steps forward, Colby. It's not happening. It's the topic of our Dominion Lending Center's poll question. But when you look at these three, and we've called them, the not so big three, is there one of them that you maybe do have a little bit of confidence in? Like I think Detroit's dead in the water. I think that's a team that really lacks direction. I'm surprised Derek Lalonde has survived as long as he has. I think the rosters in Buffalo and Ottawa are better, but still through 27 games now for each of them, very few reasons to be confident. Do you look at any one of those with a bit of a soft spot?
I guess maybe the Senators. Certainly not the Buffalo Sabres, but I just look at some of the pieces, and I look at Brady Tkachuk, and I look at Linus Ullmark, who again he hasn't been the guy who played for the Boston Bruins, and is that system, is that adjustment periods? When a guy gets traded and then signs a big deal, I like to give them somewhere between 3 and 6 months to really grade them and really judge them, because I do think there's a human side to this. Sorry, I'm like going to sneeze, which is why like my voice is cutting in and out a little bit. But I do think there's more hope there. They've got Shane Pinto, who I think has a lot to offer. You've got Brady Tkachuk. You've got a couple of pieces on the back end. Sure, they've been wildly inconsistent, but if you're making me choose between those 3 teams, I think I would probably lean into the Senators. But as it stands right now, I don't have a lot of faith in any of them. On the DFO question we put up on Twitter, on X, I commented and I said, D, none of the above. I mean, because that's kind of how I feel about these teams.
Yeah, and I do think it's fair to not be confident in any of them right now. And the other thing that's complicating the whole situation is when you look above them, Columbus, I just kind of joked they're ahead of them, and I don't think Columbus is going to stick there. But, Pittsburgh has found a bit of a groove here, 6-3-1 in their last 10. Philly's ahead of them. The Islanders have won 2 in a row. And then all of that, you still haven't caught the Rangers either. So there's a lot of teams in the mix in the Eastern Conference. And when you have to jump that many teams, it's no longer a matter of just being like, well, if we can play like 550 hockey above 500, like we'll get ourselves back in the mix. Like you're getting to a point with these three where you're going to need some sort of like an 8-game heater to really thrust yourself back into the mix and into the playoff picture. And I'm not sure if any of those three, as much as I do like the pieces in Buffalo, and I think Ottawa still has a really good young core in Linus Ullmark, is it good enough to go and win 8 games in a row at some point, or 7 of 9, or whatever you need to get in there? I just don't think any of them have that level of upside.
Yeah, but if you had to pick one of the 3 because of the goaltender, do you have that type of faith in Buffalo's goaltending situation? Yeah, UPL's, look, he got his contract. He had a good year last year, but let's not forget, Linus Ullmark is a few years removed from a Vezina. I mean, that's the top dog in the NHL. And in Detroit, it's been anything but consistency in net. And I know they've had some guys that have, again, they've come in, they've given some good innings, but we're talking about a bunch of middle relievers here. I know you've been all over the Soto to the Jays thing, so I'm going to throw some baseball at you a little bit here. But you've got a true starting pitcher versus a bunch of middle relievers. If one of them's popping, it's Linus Ullmark.
Yep, that's fair. All right, we're going to talk more about that and the Sabres in a couple of minutes here. But quickly, Colby, our weekend warriors for the last couple of days in the NHL. I'll even let you go first because you're a guest host today. Who you got?
I went with PLD. And I'll tell you right now, this is a guy who, I don't know if it was my show or your show last year. I couldn't have been harder on him for what he was doing in LA. But I'm going to give credit where credit is due. He's been consistent. His minutes are a little bit higher in the last 4 or 5 games. Over the weekend, had a 1-1. Had 1-1 against Montreal, had a big assist against Toronto. He's a plus player this year, which he hasn't really been. But you just see the way he's winning puck battles, Tyler. You see the way he's engaging. Too many times in his career, he's just been a perimeter hockey player. And when you have his size, that is never going to sit well with any coach and with any GM which is why we've seen him on the adventure throughout his career that he's been in. But it's obvious that whether it's Ovechkin, whether it's Spencer Carberry, whether it's the locker room, guys have him inspired, and he's just no longer playing at the end of his stick, right? He's bared down with that lower hand. He's in the battle. He's in the high danger areas. So he was my weekend warrior.
I'm going to go with a guy, and Joe just gave him a shout out in the chat. I'm going to Shane Wright. Goals in 3 straight games for the Seattle Kraken forward. And part of the reason I'm picking him is because I have a bit of a soft spot for Shane Wright. I think he's been painted with a little bit of an unfair brush at different points. You remember back in his draft class when he fell to 4th, and there was all that talk like, oh, he was soft and he was crying in his pre-draft interviews. And then Seattle in that first season just absolutely, I think, butchered his development, the way they were keeping him out of the lineup and in, and then down to the American League, then finally back to the OHL. It was just an absolute mess for them. And last year, he didn't play a ton. This is really going to be Shane Wright's first full season. And, not all development is never a straight line. And for Shane Wright, he's 20 and he's still a wicked smart hockey player. And I think as much as you'd love to see a top 5 pick come in and burst onto the scene and immediately start racking up points, I think sometimes you just got to be more patient with guys. And it's not like Shane Wright is 23. It's not like he's 24. He's 20 years old. Like, he still has so much time to continue growing. And again, I think people were maybe a little bit quick to write him off. And maybe that's a good thing because it got him out of the public eye and people weren't zeroing in on him. But I'm still high on Shane Wright. I think this is a guy, and listen, he's on a bit of a heater. He's still only on pace for like 35 points this season, but I still think the Kraken have a player there, and he's maybe not going to be the superstar that franchise needs, but he could still be a really, really good piece to them. So I wanted to give Shane Wright some love.
Look how long it took Alexis Lafreniere to find his way into the NHL. And furthermore, Capo Caco in New York has been really one of the consistent performers for this team during its slump. Is he number 2 overall standard? No, but he's becoming a reliable guy who looks like a full-time NHLer. So it takes everybody a different amount of time for sure.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, you can look back, and it's usually more of a thing with defensemen, but these guys who are top 5 picks who need a fresh start at some point before they ever really click in, or need 5-6 years before people start accepting them for what they are. I think Shane Wright's maybe just a bit in that boat. All right, we're running behind. We got to get to today's edition of the All 32. It's brought to you by Fountain Tire. You and your family's safety is important. That's why Fountain Tire treats your vehicle like it's their vehicle. And right now, you can save up to $225 on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear, until December 14th. Plus, save $50 or more on any service of $150. Some restrictions apply. Stop at a Fountain Tire or make an appointment at fountaintire.com. Always a pleasure to welcome Lance Lysowski from the Buffalo News to the show. And Lance, there is never a dull moment in Buffalo. And I'm sure this morning everything's focused on Sean McDermott and the Bills, which I know from yesterday. But there's still a lot of heat on this Sabres team right now. And the start of this season has been a bit of a roller coaster. So maybe just let me start with, as we sit here at the 27 game mark and they're below 500, do you see anything, or has this team shown you anything, or given the fan base a reason to think that they can go on the kind of run that would be necessary to get themselves back into it? Or is it getting to the point where it's a lost cause?
They haven't won more than 3 games in a row in almost 2 years. God, I mean, you look at that. They've had 2 losing streaks of 3 games. They're in their 6-game skid right now, and there have been some close losses in that. They probably should have beaten Minnesota, Vancouver. They played a really good game against Winnipeg at home, but you got to win in this league. And this fan base is tired of hearing of, we're going to learn from it, or moral victories from this group. And, as much as I think Lindy Ruff's return has brought some good faith, the fans, they know him. He knows the marketplace. They believe in the message that he's delivering for the most part. At the same time, the fans, you just see it. They're losing. They're beating themselves a lot of night, guys. They're turning the puck over. They're not, again, like coming into the season, everybody thought the coach was going to fix everything, but especially the younger players on this team, they're still repeating the same mistakes. And yeah, it's maddening to the people on the outside. And when you look at it statistically, it's very marginal improvement from where they were a year ago.
Yeah, and look, anytime your younger players aren't progressing, when you're in I don't know if they're calling it a rebuild or not, but they're they're obviously in a perpetual rebuild. But when your younger players aren't progressing, that's where coaches can get in trouble, or GMs can get in trouble for hiring a coach. Look at what just happened to Luke Richardson. I don't think the expectations were high. I think it was the regression that got him into trouble. But Lance, let me go bigger picture here with you, because this was actually a topic we spent some time on this morning on Morning Cup of Hockey. I look up, their financial situation as far as their cap and their roster goes moving forward. And it's kind of glaring to me. You've got 5 skaters and a goaltender locked up. Everybody else is 1 or 2 years max. A number of them are good, promising young players that are on very manageable numbers, but you've already got cap space. The cap is going up. You're 24 months away from, you could basically have an entire new team, except for 5 players. Kevyn Adams has done nothing, in my opinion, that has given me confidence that he knows what he's doing in this situation. What is the timeline here for his leash? And is he going to be the guy that gets to usher this new opportunity with this roster?
We're going to find out, right? There was a point, I think, during this latest rebuild for the Sabres where the general manager and their former coach, Don Granato, they were under the impression they had all the time in the world. There wasn't enough urgency after they finished with 91 points in 2023 and barely missed the playoffs. You look at what they did that summer. They brought in Eric Johnson and Connor Clifton. It wasn't enough. That team needed another forward. He didn't do it. He waited too long. They've gone out and they've brought in some valuable veterans. You look at Ryan McLeod this summer has been a really nice fit. Jordan Greenway got brought in. Clifton's worked out in a third pair role. Jason Zucker was a nice signing in the summer. But guys, this goes back to them rushing players to the National Hockey League. Jack Quinn, JJ Paterka, those are the 2 in particular. I hate to pick on a couple of players, but when you're counting on them in your top 6 and you really need them to play 18 minutes a night and they continue to repeat the same mistakes over and over again, at some point, it's not on the coach, right? Lindy Ruff has come in, and it looks like those 2 players I just mentioned might sit tonight. So, and when the entire plan of Kevyn Adams was based around, we want to build around these young players. They're our future. They bought out Jeff Scarron in the summer. It didn't really use the cap space. They've got over $7 million in cap space right now. And they decided to count on these young guys. Zach Benson was rushed to the league. He was drafted 13th overall, and he made the team at 18 years old, and they decided to keep him. And he's good defensively, but guess what? It's tough to score in this league at that age. It is tough to win every puck battle at that age. And when, again, he's in your top 6, he's going to be on the ice against Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, and they got eaten alive in that game where they lost the 4-0 lead. So at a certain point now, you're going to see these veterans playing more, and these younger guys aren't going to get as much ice time under Lindy Ruff. Dylan Cousins just got moved to the wing. So yes, time is running out, and you would think, again, and I think that's why Kevyn Adams, you heard that frustration in his press conference on Friday, because he went out, he tried to get Martin Aegis. He went out this summer and tried to make other deals to really try to push this team over the finish line, but he targeted players with no move and no trade clauses who blocked moves to Buffalo. I understand the frustration there, and it's gotten to Kevyn Adams. You saw it in that press conference, but guess what? There are people across the league who don't have no move and no trade, and Kevyn Adams acquired those players already. Go get Troy Terry from Anaheim. Go save him from the Ducks because he's being improperly used there. There are players to go get, and I understand the frustration, but at a certain point, you got to take action. And although that trade might require you to trade somebody like Jack Quinn, and that might be tough to swallow as Kevyn Adams and watch your first draft pick go succeed elsewhere and sort of admit defeat. Like, I made a mistake here. We got to do something differently. We need a new track. It just seems like some stubbornness and trying to stick to the same plan, despite the fact that you could trade a young player on this team. You still got others in Rochester they're developing. They could replace a Jack Quinn, and I'm just mentioning him as an example, but it's going to require him to make a very difficult decision at some point, and he's running out of time. He is, because guess what? If they lose tonight and Montreal wins, the Sabres could be at the bottom of the East. How do you sell that as progress to your fan base and your owner who's notoriously impatient? This general manager, Kevyn Adams, has gotten more time than Jason Botterill, Tim Murray. He's the longest tenured since Darcy Regier in Buffalo. At some point, I know you're selling youth, you're selling the future. It's been 13 years, and it's going to be 14 if they miss again.
So as the Sabres fans sit here in pain, every other fan base kind of just looks at their roster on Puckpedia and licks their chops a little bit. And our comment section is, Henry Yokoharu. And we got another one, Peyton Krebs. And this one from Jay, are the Sabres shopping Dylan Cousins? if there is some level of a teardown or a shakeup coming, is there one player that you view is more likely to go?
Well, Henry Jokiharju's really struggled under Lindy Ruff. It's funny that any opposing fan base would watch him right now and want him on their team. It's going to be difficult. You guys mentioned those long-term contracts. If you're watching Dylan Cousins right now as another general manager, you're going to lowball Kevin Adams an offer. Like you're not getting equal value for Dylan Cousins right now, especially with just the lack of progress he's made defensively while playing center. He just got moved to the wing because he's struggling so badly defending down the middle of the ice. And that's over 2 coaches. Again, like, you could look at Peyton Krebs. You could look at, there's guys across this roster, but guess what? Lindy Ruff loves Peyton Krebs. It's the guys who are playing with soft skill right now that really come to mind for me. Like, I know that JJ Peterka scored 28 goals last year, and we were talking about how much is he going to get paid this summer, but he's not fitting under this coach. And if their plan is to keep Lindy Ruff, and this is the vision that they're building the Sabres as, hard skill, and what we're seeing succeed in the playoffs, is JJ Peterka somebody you move, right? Because you're going to get a lot more from him probably right now than you would for even Dylan Cousins because of the contract. So you look at the D-core, I think Jokiharju is the only one that he'd be willing to move right now. I don't think he wants to wave the white flag on Bo Byram after he just traded Casey Middlestad to get him. He's not trading Owen Power. He's not trading Rasmus Dahlin. So that's the thing. They have very limited options trading away players on this NHL roster because I think they like their bottom 6. How do they shake up that top 6 without, you're looking at Jack Quinn, you're looking at JJ Peterka, maybe Peyton Krebs, but I'm not convinced Lindy Ruff wants that guy to go right now. He's winning faceoffs, and he's become a very valuable little chess piece that you can use on the PK, and he's gotten himself on the power play because he's winning draws.
Man, desperate times in Buffalo, and you outlined it there. A loss tonight, and they could be sitting in the basement. Lance, always appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Shout out to Lance Lysowski from the Buffalo News. Find him on Twitter or X at L Lysowski. Man, yeah, it's interesting in Buffalo, and interesting is being probably pretty polite. Let's move along to our hashtag askdfo inbox question. Let's get to this one. Speaking of desperate times, is Peter Laviolette's job on the line tonight if the Rangers lose to the Blackhawks? And they asked Jay Woodcroft, Joel Quenneville as a replacement. Cole, what do you think of Peter Laviolette's seat? Is it getting hot? Does it deserve to be hot?
I think it is absolutely hot because it's New York, and James Dolan could fire him today at 5:00 just because he's in a bad mood. I mean, we've seen they've gone from the rebuild to not the rebuild. Then they fire David Quinn, who's 10 games above 500 during a rebuild. They move off of Jeff Gorton. I mean, it's craziness that happens there with James Dolan. To address in the chat, Quenneville isn't happening because Larry Brooks said it. I wouldn't say that Larry Brooks is the authority on things in New York, just to throw that out there. But look, I don't think it's a one size, you lose tonight, you're fired. Now, if they go out and they lay an egg on home ice and they get embarrassed by the Chicago Blackhawks, yeah, okay, that could be it. But if you get into a game and the game gets to overtime or whatever may happen, I mean, there is no easy games in the NHL, especially when your team's not playing well. But here's what I'll say. Igor Shesterkin just had a kid. The new dad bump is a real thing. He's starting tonight, and his numbers against the Blackhawks are like better than any other team in the National Hockey League. So I think the Rangers will get a win tonight. But ultimately, yeah, the seat should be hot for Peter Laviolette, and Joel Quenneville would be a no-brainer hire for me.
We will see. It's a bit of a gross night in the NHL as we get into our daily bets brought to you. Oh, no, sorry. Dominion Lending poll question, Colby. I almost forgot about that. Is your mortgage up for renewal? Lock in the best rates and products with Dominion Lending Centers. Visit dominionlending.ca. We threw the poll up on Twitter, put it over in our YouTube. The Twitter audience has the most confidence in the Ottawa Senators, coming in at 46%. Crazy to me that Buffalo is actually last on that list. But looking at the YouTube, it's more of the same. 54% of our YouTube audience picked the Senators, 23% Detroit, 22% Buffalo. I am a little bit surprised with people backing the Wings a bit more than they're backing the Sabres. But again, it's a bit of a disgusting coin flip when you look at the state of those two sides. Let's move along to our daily bets brought to you by Bet365. I mentioned it. Not a lot of great spots here. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. The Hawks, Rangers, Wings, Sabres, Ducks, Habs. I don't want to back any of those teams. I'm taking one shot prop. It's Mike Matheson, the defenseman on Montreal. He's missed it in 3 straight, but only by 1 shot in each of those games. Before that, He had hit it in back-to-back. I love the price tag. Love the fact that Montreal should be able to get a lot of shots through on the Ducks tonight. Give me Matheson, 3+ shots on goal at +155. Which brings us to garbage time, Colby. We can end the show with a bit of a lighthearted note, I guess, during the teddy bear toss in the Ottawa 67s game. A fight breaks out.
I love it. I saw this. I got a good laugh about it. I'll never forget playing in, the Hershey Bears have kind of the famous teddy bear toss. Like they try to break the record, and we were playing them in the American Hockey League during the teddy bear toss. So these are fun to see a fight like this. The Grinch making an appearance out on the ice. I love the fact that it's like a 5-on-5 fight too. Like I'm not going to lie. I get such a major kick when you start seeing the teams come together and guys are jumping in. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Pat, can you put it up again, that part with the Grinch? I don't know how I missed that the first time. That is also how at no point do any of these players sit there and be like, well, this is pretty ridiculous. Like, you can't be like seriously angry and fighting someone as like plush bears are being thrown at you.
And the Grinch, yeah.
The Grinch.
Oh, man.
Oh my God. Okay. That is a wrap on today's edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Colby and I are back in the mix tomorrow. Shout out to our guy, Lance Lysowski, our producer, Pat Puff, everybody in the YouTube. Great stuff. As always, we'll chat with you tomorrow at noon Eastern. See you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.